Welcome to Casting Nets. I am one of your hosts, Pastor Dave Rudott from Emmanuel Lutheran in Shirley, joining you on this cold, brisk day wearing the best sweater vest you could wear during the season of Advent because it is the color blue. And I am joined here with Pastor William Harley from St. John and Maribel.
Hi, how are you? I am not wearing a sweater vest because I am adversely opposed to the theological presence of sweater vests. I think they are. I think there's a I have to find it. I'm sure there is something about how anybody who wears sweater vests are questionable when it comes to the theology they may speak while wearing the sweater vest. When they're not wearing the sweater vest, then they are theologically sound.
Sure. and duck vests with zippers down the front, those are fine.
Absolutely. Especially ones with insignias of things that you support. I think those are far more acceptable.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about this very same topic later on today in something called human traditions, and our takeaways and so on. I'm just before we get going, I'm sharing this on all the Facebook groups.
Very good. Yeah.
On the Wells group and the Wells discussion group,
because they are going to want to know and vote and have their say in the sweater vest. I think that our little experiment in the voting for which Peanuts movie is the best one, it fell flat. I'm guessing all of the participants only cared about more Star Trek references because that's the only one that they voted on. Wasn't it Ghostbusters that one?
That was one of the options, but nobody voted for it. So that just
were you the only one that went on and voted? Get all your.
That's not how surveys work. You don't ask how many people actually voted. You just say, well, 100% of the people voted for more Star Trek. That's all.
Yeah, but that's not fair. That you have a very big family, and when you put it out there and you say you have to vote for what I would like, so that
I didn't do that at all. Those are accusations. Those are unfounded accusations. I didn't need to do that with my family in any way, shape, or form. So I did not compel them to vote anyway.
That's because you raised them to like Star Trek. I mean, that's a whole nurture. That's a whole nurture thing.
Train up a child in the way they should go. I mean, that's clearly in the scripture. So I was just only following what the scripture said. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the human traditions aspect of this podcast. But before we do so, we need a disclaimer.
We disclaim everything that needs to be disclaimed in a blanket fashion. And it also should be said, and we'll just throw this out here, that it was brought to our attention that the conversations that we have might have some lingering effects in your life, such as, but not a full list of all things included, going to a confessional church, gathering with other confessional believers, reading your Book of Concord, getting more into the scriptures, finding sound, good, wholesome material that you want to gather around. All of these things may be a corollary of listening to the show. So if you are allergic to any of those things, there's a vaccination for that. It's God's word. And it works very, very well to help chase away the demons that may infest our life and cause allergic reactions to sound biblical teaching. I think I hit all the red flags, yes?
All the negatives, yeah. The positives is if you like this show, you can give us a good rating on whatever podcasting platform you're using. You can use a 4-star if you're on the Apple podcast, 4 out of 5. If you're watching on Rumble, you can give us a thumbs up, or on Facebook, thumbs up, or things of that nature. We will not take it personally that you like the things that we are putting out there. We're not going to use this as validation whatsoever. If you want to look at where all of our stuff is, or want to be able to search all of our stuff, go to castingnetspod.org. That's a website that we have put up, and that website I'm starting to work on compiling all of our podcast in topical form. And that's usually through YouTube, because YouTube is the only one that I can find that we can put these episodes into playlists. And so if there'll be a playlist such as the Book of Romans or a playlist on the Book of Concord or the Smalcald articles. So if you're just joining us on the Smalcald articles, we're finishing up today. But if you want to see the other stuff, go to our website castingnetspod.org.
Absolutely. I think we should.
You know, we started the show, and then we forgot the most important element of the opening segment, which is the dad jokes. And today I wanted to tell you about a dad joke that I have. I have a Microsoft Advent calendar. Unfortunately, I can only have 3 windows open at one time.
That actually is pretty good. I'm not going to lie. That was probably one of my favorites because
and
that's
this one,
true.
This is one that you'll like, especially from last week, is I don't like it that viruses and bacteria invades my body without my permission. That just makes me sick.
I'll give you that one. That one's a good one too. That one's a good. Did you scour the internet for those two?
Yeah, I do. I have like a little on my Twitter handle.
Sure.
If I see one, I will repost it, and then if I find the good ones that I found over my little X doom scrolling, I'll put those in there.
Yeah, no, that was a good. I like those. Those were good. I would say.
And then the other one that you'll like, there's one more, is that I started. It starts like this. I started putting a rock in my pocket every time people are singing or playing Christmas music, and I would throw it at them. I call it my Jingle Bell Rock.
I didn't like that one so much. No, the other two were far better. I have to say it. Someone has to tell you. That was
thank you. I need the groans. I mean, the groans fuel me. Otherwise, I'll just stop. If you guys say these are all awesome, or if you always are laughing, I won't be encouraged in the right way. Yeah, so today we're really delving into the articles that really made the Roman Catholic Church furious. There's at the tail end of the Smalcald articles, but he's going to be talking about priests getting married and monks walking out of monasteries, and basically saying that medieval church law is a bunch of hot ale. And we'll see as you're looking through this, it's all not just Martin Luther's preferences and saying, I don't like these things. It is actually in defense of the gospel. And I think he does a very short, this is the last volley, like he shows, like he blasts and says, this is bad because of the gospel, because it stands in the way of Christ. Yeah. And so, dear listener, as you're watching this, or as you're thinking about the Smalcald articles, if you're thinking about Martin Luther, the man himself, the Smalcald articles are really good at demonstrating that he's defending the gospel, not just his own personal preferences, like Will Harley does.
Well, I can't say I'm just I never defend my own personal preferences. Most of them have nothing to defend. I mean, when something's right, it's just right. I mean, but I think what you see with Luther, and this is what makes, and maybe this is what we're seeing and why we love it so much, is not only is it just in the defense of the gospel, because I mean, Melanchthon also was in defense of the gospel and things of that nature. But what makes Luther such a breath of fresh air, I think, is just the pastoral heart. And you see that coming out. It's really the defense of the gospel for the sake of souls, not just to be right. It's for the sake of souls. And he is just a pastor's pastor. I mean, he just has a pastoral heart, and that's amazing from somebody who had such guilt, and somebody who came from actually law school. You know, he was going to be a lawyer, to someone who felt guilted into going into ministry to begin with, to see someone so freed by the gospel and have such a heart and desire to minister to people. I think some of these things are just kind of an amazing turnaround. You see what the gospel really what it really does in bearing fruit in someone's life. So let's do it.
So yeah, Article 10 is where we are, the ordination and the call. Again, these are very These
we have
are
some
very
comments
short,
that seem
not
true.
a ton of content to them, but the Article 10 is essentially saying, summarizing, is saying who has the authority to call a pastor. Again, at the time that this was written, the Roman Catholic Church said we have the authority to call pastors, and so they would deny priests in congregations in Germany because, well, you guys are upheaval. You're causing all kinds of problems. This is one way that the Roman Catholic Church was trying to exert its force over the churches and saying, oh, you want to break from us? Well, we'll deny you a priest. We're going to deny you services. And so it was a very, very clean article talking about who has the authority to ordain a pastor.
Well, and I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. And it's not only the authority to ordain, but it's also the authority of how are you a legitimate pastor? I mean, he touches on the fact that you're not legitimate if you're not doing the work of the church. And the work of the church is preaching and teaching. It is administering the sacraments. And when I read that section, I mean, it's hard not to look at, this is maybe a controversial thing, and I know we do it more out of respect than out of intent, but it's hard not to look at that and say, okay, when we take a pastor who's served a congregation and we call them to be a teacher in our schools, they really, from what Luther is saying, is they cease to be a pastor, and they are now just their reverend. They're just their education. They're just their thing, because they are not doing the work of a pastor, which is looking over and caring for souls. And I think this is one of those sections, as short as it is a very telling session and section for us. And I get it. Maybe we say this out of respect because they once were, but really they no longer are. Luther is very adamant to saying a pastor is one who is called by the congregation to serve the congregation as the shepherd, to be watching over the souls, to be administering the sacraments, to be doing this work. And if you're not doing that work, you're not a pastor. And I think that's an important nuance that's found within it.
Yeah, that's in the end of paragraph 2, where they said they neither preach nor teach nor baptize nor administer the Lord's Supper, but perform any work or office of the church. Therefore, they persecuting. I guess the only argument that would say that pastors in our Lutheran high schools are still pastors, that they're still teaching. But the point is well made. Are they doing the function of what a pastor does? And if not, why are we so hesitant to call them pastors? And I think we had a symposium this last fall where that question was asked in one of the responses, because we were talking about public ministry, and it was met with crickets. Like, nobody wants to talk about this, but it is a worthwhile thought experiment. We're just two pastors talking things through and thinking about, okay, I'm called. What am I called to do? I'm not called to a position. I'm not called to a title. I'm called to a function. And if I'm not doing my function, why do I get the title?
And that's where I would do the pushback, right? Because I would agree with you that the reverends that are called into the teaching profession, they're teaching God's word. I'm not denying that. But they aren't, like, they're not called, let me backtrack a little bit. Like, we have pastors who are called to campuses to be the campus pastor. And what are they doing? They're not only just teaching, they're baptizing. If someone has never been baptized, they will baptize. They are holding services there on campus, right? They're doing the thing where you could say, okay, that's the function of a pastor. But if you have someone that's in the classroom teaching, they're not a pastor in that, because they're not administering the sacraments. They're not called to administer those sacraments. And I think that's where you have that dividing line. It's not just teaching. It's not just, and I would even say that if you have a person that works in the church, and you might call them the senior pastor or whatever, but they're doing the bookwork of the church, right? They're just doing all of the administrative stuff, but they're not doing the pastoral aspect of it, which is teaching the Bible studies, visiting their sick, administering the sacraments to the members. They're a reverend, but they aren't the shepherd. And I think there's
I,
something, like you said, the position. What are you doing?
yeah, I'd be hard. It'd be difficult to imagine that there'd be a senior pastor who isn't doing at least any baptizing or administering the sacraments in a big congregation. But
Agreed. But
it's a thought. It's a thought question, right?
Right. Right.
If you have a senior pastor who's doing administrative stuff, is he actually doing all of the aspects of a pastor, or is he, content to sit behind the desk or sitting in the office and not do all of these things that we mentioned?
Right.
Yep.
And like you said, I can't imagine, especially in our circles, that ever happens. But I mean, in the thought experiment, if they did, or if it happened, then, I would say the same thing. Because I think this is where Luther's pastoral heart comes out and says, the job of the pastor is to do these things. That's the pastor's job. That's their function. And when they're not doing those things, they're not functioning as that. So there's something else. And then therefore they shouldn't be respected as the pastor of the congregation. So.
Yeah. One last point that I want to make before we move on, unless you have anything else, is one of the neat things about being a member of a congregation is when your pastor comes and he is installed, and you have all of the other pastors there, and they're doing the laying on of hands, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. A lot of times people are just they like that scene where you see all the pastors up there ordaining or installing a pastor, putting their hands on and giving them encouragement and things of that nature. I think we just want to make sure that we are clarifying pastors are given that call by Christ through the congregation. And so if you see, like, I know it has been done in our circles, and it might be done in other circles too, where you have like the congregation president up there, and they would do the same thing. They would put their hands on and say a blessing or a scripture passage because they're trying to encourage this person in the call that he has now been called into. And I'm not saying it should happen or that it can't happen. It's just for us to think about. It's not that the pastors up there are doing the job of putting that pastor in place. It's not Wells Synod coming in and putting this pastor in. They're just there in support of this larger church that has called these individuals to the pastoral ministry. But you, the individual members of that congregation, you have through Christ has given you that ability to call this man to be your pastor.
And I think it is, and as much as I agree with you 100% that it's not like the pastors are conveying this authority onto the person. I do believe that it's also a very significant event that they acknowledge that this individual will now be the guiding force of that congregation. And I think that's important because we stand together. And that's part of what the synod is that we are not alone out on our own doing these things. We are standing together. And so when you have other pastors that are coming and they lay on the hands for ordination, you have these other pastors who are coming and as representatives of their congregations saying, we together acknowledge that this call has been placed on you. We together acknowledge that you are taking on this very heavy spiritual task, and that we're going to walk with you with it, and that we're here for you in that regard. And I think that is an important thing for our congregations to see, that when they called a person to do a thing, that others around them in their fellowship, in their same belief, are also in support of that thing, and that they're in support of the person they called. So that you're not this person out on your own, right? And you're not your church out on your own.
Right. Not that we're hiring this guy and we can,
right.
We're putting you in, we can take you out. It's
right.
none of this kind of, yes, it's local, but it's also part of a larger whole.
Right. And I view it in the same vein, and maybe it's silly, but I view that in the same vein as like a marriage ceremony. The marriage ceremony is, yes, between the Lord and between the two people making those promises together, but it's witnessed by everybody else, and it's very public. And I believe that same thing with the pastor. The pastor has been called by the congregation to do the work of the church amongst them, to be the physical representation of Christ in the service, as he pronounces and he's leading, to be in many ways the figurehead of the church, right, in that general location. But it's also a very public thing that you're not the only people that are going to know. Everybody else is going to know that this is together now. That particular pastor is with that particular congregation, and it becomes a very public thing, which is a good thing. So,
4 more articles to go. Article number 11 deals with of the marriage of priests. So
I think they should be married.
What?
I think they should be married.
Yeah, priests should be married. Yeah, that's what Martin Luther said. You are in agreement with Martin Luther. That's nice. Always nice to hear. You have that validation. You don't need the Facebook like. You just need Martin Luther to give you validation that, yeah, I think they should be married.
I think we would have gotten along, Martin Luther and I. I think him and I have a lot of the same likes and dislikes. We love ministry. We're not so hot on people. We like to have our own study time, and a big empty house would be great. I think he would very much.
I don't think he would agree on that one because he loved children.
Well, I mean,
that's what do you call that? Right? Projecting. You're projecting your. I like these things, and therefore Martin Luther must have liked those things as well.
I think Martin Luther loved his children. I love my children.
You just want them out of the house. I love my house more. Anyway, there's some really cool stuff in here talking about like why is the Roman Catholicism asking these men not to be men. They don't have the authority to say a man is a woman or a woman is a man or a man can't be a man. And I thought it was very refreshing for Martin Luther talking about, hey, men like to be married and liked all of the blessings of marriage, companionship and sexual happiness and children. I mean, you're denying this. What gives you the right to deny a man to be a man, to enjoy those things? And so I thought that was very refreshing. Like, here he isn't just our typical society that looks at fathers and fatherhood and husbands in such a low esteem. And he's fighting for it. It's like, this is a good thing to have for our pastors to have as well.
Well, I also think that, and when I was reading it, I was, it's kind of interesting to be reminded on how so 21st century minded Luther already was. And that was that one section, right, in paragraph 2 of that section where he says, now neither we nor they have been given the power to make a woman out of a man or a man out of a woman or to nullify either sex. And I looked at that and I'm like, wow, that is perfect for a lot of our 21st century discussions that we try to have. And Luther just comes right out and says, I mean, he's applying it to marriage of the priest, but I mean, it's really inapplicable for our society. Who gives you the right to change what God has ordained and God has put in? And you don't have that right to do that, nor the power to do that. And I think it speaks to us even today. I think also, and it gets a little bit of short shrift, a little bit. It's a very short section, but it's an amazing section because Luther himself was so resistant to marriage. And I and that's the part that I think is just is amazing to me, that he would say, yes, I think that the pastor should be married, the priest should be married, when he himself was like, I don't want to be married. But then when he got married, he was like, I love marriage. It's such a great thing. So again, you see that wonderful turnaround.
Yeah, I do I know the Bible passages earlier in these articles are a little sparse, but they're very powerful. 1 Timothy 4 verses 1-3 talking about the heresies that are coming up, and one like it's right there, they forbid people from getting married. So he's like, how much more clear can you be? If a group is forbidding you from getting married, you are therefore going against the word of God. And I don't know spiritual gymnastics that the Roman Catholics have to do in order to deny First Timothy chapter 4 verses 1 to 3. I'm sure there is a nice long, logical in one sense, because it's just going to make such a laundry list of reasons, but it's very plain. It's a huge shot. Like, if you deny someone to be married, you are in the teachings of demons. And Paul doesn't mince words. Luther doesn't mince words. So, not to say that you have to get married. That's not what we're saying. But it is the stand of saying it's better to be married, or to say you should not be married. That's the problem. Not like some do have the gift of Paul, but is it the position of the church to say a person should not be married? Paul says that's a position of demons.
Right. Yeah.
All
Again, right. I'm in huge support of marriage. I think, and I think anybody would, especially looking at it in a 21st century lens, look back and say, with all of the counseling that needs to happen between married couples, and with all of the understanding of where parents are today, having pastors who are married really help in that. They can understand some of the struggles, some of the things that go on.
Yeah.
I think there's just that beautiful interchange that now becomes with the congregation and the pastor.
Yeah, and again, we're not saying you have to be married. We're not pressuring guys to be married to be pastors. I know there was a long discussion on one of the Wells groups about how Wells is pressuring pastors to get married before they're ordained, or that there's a stigma if you have a single pastor. And maybe a guy is struggling with same-sex attractions or things of that nature, where he is like, this is my temptation, this is my struggle, but I also want to serve God's people with the Word of God. Each pastor has their own list of struggles and temptations. Maybe this is one of those where it's kind of like the pastor who is prone to drinking alcohol. He says, I am not going to drink, but I'm going to talk about it's okay to drink, and it's not a sin. In the same way, a guy who says it's good to be married, even when he himself is personally struggling against that particular temptation.
Sure, but
moving on, if you're ready to.
I think it needs to be said that congregations love it when their pastors are married, because then it's a twofer, right? When they call their pastors,
two for the price of one.
They get another called worker who volunteers to help be a part of the. I'm kidding.
Tim Gray mentions, he says, I have the gift. It's a quote from Professor Daniel Deutschlander, who was single his entire life. So moving on to the church. I really like this one too. And I think it's very applicable today, because we have misunderstandings as to what is the church and what isn't the church. So I want to read those two paragraphs. We do not agree with them that they are the church. They are not the church, nor will we listen to those things that under the name of the church they command or forbid. Thank God today a 7-year-old knows what the church is, namely the holy believers and lambs who hear the voice of their shepherd. That's the church. This definition is fundamentally contrast with the definition of Rome using at that time, because Rome would say, no, the church is Peter. The church is the Pope and the papacy and the apostolic succession. That's the church, not the people who are sitting there listening to their shepherd through under shepherds. But this is a good definition that we need to talk about today as well, because I think you've talked about this, and the former co-host talked about this quite a bit. When people look at their membership roles, like who is a member here? Well, is this person listening to their shepherd or not? I mean, the church isn't a business. The church isn't a country club where not everybody has to participate. No, the church is people who are listening to God's word and receiving the sacraments. And so that is so fundamentally different than what we want to make the church into, which is an institution or something I can pay my dues for, but I don't have to actually participate in. This is something that's there for me when I need it, but I don't need to I don't need to be receiving these gifts. And so Martin Luther's 7-year-old speaks to us in 2025 as well. What is the church? Those who hear the voice of their shepherd.
Yeah, I think and when we talk about this, there was a bunch of things that ran through my head. And the things that ran through my head when we talked about the church, one is what we teach our kids in confirmation, right? The difference between the invisible church and the visible church. And we would say the invisible church is all of God's people who believe in him, who've been washed clean through the blood of the Lamb, and been brought to faith by the Spirit, right? And they only God knows who they are, right? But then we would say, as we teach confirmation, that invisible church will have visible signs that they always gather around, things that they always do. And those visible signs would be gathering around the word and the sacraments. They're participating with the sacraments. That always has kind of stuck with me because we say, okay, the invisible church will always gather around the visible things of the church, right? So why are we and every now and then you get this and we'll pick up on it. Well, they'll say there's a difference between a baptized member and a communicant member. And then someone will say, well, what's the difference? Like, aren't they just members? Because isn't a baptized member supposed to always be gathering around the word? And they are participating in the sacraments, although they might not participate in the one yet. They participated in the other. And so there's that question. And maybe that's a good time for us to now to talk about that because what is Luther's, I know, trying to sum everything up in a very concise way, but these are the things that we deal with now when we deal with what is the church. Is a baptized member the church? Or are they only the church when they become communicant members? Do you have to participate in both sacraments before you're the church? Or what if you become old and you no longer can remember that you need the sacrament and can't receive the Lord's Supper? Are you no longer part of the church? Because there are those people in nursing homes that the church no longer visits them. And I'm not necessarily saying from the Lutheran circles, but from other Christian circles, because they're no longer contributing, because they're out of the physical location. What do you got? What do you thought?
Yeah, that's a very valid thought for us to be thinking about because it's so natural for us to go, well, they're not doing anything for us. They can't put offerings in the offering plate because they're not a communicant member. Because if you're a communicant member, most likely you have a job and you can, but these little children, they don't contribute anything. I think if we are in a place where we are making a distinction between who are the real members and who are not the real members, then this is a good article for us to refresh and say the church are those who hear the message of the shepherd, receive his gifts. And whether they're young or old or whether they are can have a job or not, this is the church. I think the distinctions are good as far as like who can commune and those kinds of things, or voting members. Like we have members and voting members, and you say, well, are you really a member unless you're a voting member? No, you are still a member. The way that we have voting membership set up is just how we make decisions in this church. Not necessarily, we're not making a value judgment and saying you have this level of membership and then that level of membership. Gold membership is the voting membership and regular membership is the other one. What?
The voting membership is executive membership.
Yes. Yeah. The body of Christ they don't all do the same function, but they are all the body of Christ.
No, and I agree with you, and I like your answer, and I think that's important for us to realize. But I do believe that becomes the question, right? And I think that the synod sometimes has gone a little bit sideways on some of this, because remember back in the day, and it was many years ago, when you would have to do statistics, it was questions like how many people have come up for communion, right? How many are receiving communion in the church on an average and per Sunday, and And now some of those questions are no longer being asked. And it makes you wonder, are we looking at just what names on the book, or are we looking at the people who are truly gathering? Because I'm of the opinion, and I think you are too, we've talked about this before, that you may have people on your books that you are trying to check up on and trying to call back, but your membership are the people that are in the pew. So your church might have 180 people on the books, but you only have 70 people that are actually members of this visible place.
Yeah. And this is all good thoughts for when you're trying to reach out to someone who isn't going to church, and they're like, I don't need to go to church in order to be a Christian. You're like, well, that's where your shepherd is. Why aren't you going to be the place where your shepherd is? That's where your shepherd gives the gifts of the Lord's Supper. What do you have against his gifts? And so it's not about the pastor. It's not about the people. It's about your shepherd and your connection to your shepherd through this. Yeah, yes, it's an institution. Yes, it's organized. But it is, like you were saying, the invisible church getting the visible gifts through a visible way.
Yep. It's like you've done this before. Like you've maybe reached out to some of those people and had a conversation with them about these things. It was smooth. It was good. I liked it. He doesn't know what to do. He's just like, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Engage. There we go.
Next article. We got 2 more to go. How one is justified before God and does good works. It's really interesting. We've already talked about justification. But here you're like, why is he bringing it up again? Well, he's going to talk about good works again. And it's really good as far as, how he mentioned the Bible passages were kind of light earlier. But in this section, the Bible passages are a little bit heavier, which is good because he does do a very succinct job of talking about good works don't make somebody good, but a good person declared by God to be just does those good works. Works are not the works are fruits. They're not roots. They're not the way that you get justified. You are justified, and therefore you are doing these other good things as well. Right. So he does a very good job of harmonizing Romans and James in one paragraph and lists a bunch of Bible passages for you to look at and explore as he's talking about the connection between justification, which he's already talked about, but he's not afraid to talk about again because, like you said, he is a pastor at heart. He wants to give people comfort. And then he's also talking about, as a Christian, you are going to do these good works. However, it's coming from the activity of God, not something that you're doing to get any activity from God.
And actually, it was interesting because we kind of were going to go over this section, and so I was rereading this section and getting prepared for that. And I had a member of my congregation come to visit me and have part of that conversation was he asked a question, and I'm going to throw out his question to you and see how you answer it. But his question to me was, because we were kind of talking about repentance, we were talking about that declaration of justification, and he said, so what comes first? He says, does the proclamation come first, or does faith come first that receives the proclamation?
That's a softball question.
It is
Unless
a softball.
there's something. Yeah, it's basically the proclamation of justification, which is how he starts off. Justification that through faith, as Peter says, we have a new and clean heart. Well, how do you get faith? Well, faith comes from hearing the message, which is what he talked about in the justification section.
Right.
Unless I missed the question.
No. And that's kind of what I was answering. I answered him. I said, in the proclamation, faith is created. In the doing of the thing, faith is created that receives the thing. And that was a very hard concept for him to recognize. And I think he struggled with faith being an action. And that's really what kind of came out, is that he struggled with faith being one of the first good works of all the good works that flow from, right? The proclamation of justification. And so it's one of those things where it's just that fine balance. You have the proclamation of you are justified. And in that proclamation, faith is worked in your heart. that receives now all of these promises, all of these proclamations. These things are yours, and they have a result. And the result is that these things now flow from it. And I think there's um, in our world today, we try to compartmentalize, and we try to plan out and say which comes first, chicken or the egg, and we think we got to have an order to everything. Um, and it's just refreshing to recognize and fall back on maybe Augustine's word, since Martin Luther was an Augustine monk, um, that God commands what he gives and gives what he commands, right? And we see that in play here in this article, and I think that's why he combines them. How are we justified, and what flows from it? It's kind of got that flavor to it.
Yeah, well said. I want to talk about what makes a good, before we move on, what
Sure.
makes a work good. I thought he does a very good job of explaining when you're doing your thing, when God is working in you, the ability to love your God and love your neighbor. Well, is it good all by itself? No, it still is. It's sinful and imperfect, but it's covered over by Christ. And then he patches things in that God's people will see exactly what he's trying to say. So I'm going to go there in paragraph 2. He says, such faith, renewal, and forgiveness of sins are followed by good works. That's Ephesians 2, verses 8 and 9. What is still sinful and imperfect in them will not be counted as sin or defect for Christ's sake. Psalm 32, 1 and 2, and Romans 4, 7 and 8. The entire individual, both his person and his works, is declared to be righteous and holy from pure grace and mercy shed upon us and spread over us in Christ. Keywords. Therefore, we cannot boast of any merits or works if they are viewed apart from grace and mercy. As it is written, let the one who boasts in the Lord. And that's 1 Corinthians 1:31, which we've been going through in Bible class, Matthew 24, the sheep and the goat, or maybe it was a sermon actually a couple of weeks ago, sheep and the goats. Lord, when do we see you do these things? And again, they are demonstrating exactly this truth that Martin Luther is saying, is that our works that he credits to us as good we know they're not ours. We know they're not good. We know they're sinful. They're only good because they are viewed in Christ and what he has done. They've been covered over in his grace and his mercy and his forgiveness. God looks at them as good, not because we did them or that they had any intrinsic value, but because Christ covers them. And so in the last day, when Jesus says, you did all these cool things and you get to be in heaven with me because I was hungry, and all the laundry list, and God's people will say, we didn't do those things, because they're saying it isn't our works. It is always because of Christ. We boast not in ourselves and in the things that we do and the good things that we do, but we boast in the Lord, who covers over everything that we do with his blood.
Yeah, it was. I had this also in confirmation. I used that we were talking about good works in the third article, and I was trying to explain to them the difference between something that's civilly good or like a secular good thing, and something that is truly good in God's eyes. And I used the example. I said, you have an unbeliever and has nothing to do and wants nothing to do with Christ or the church, but gives millions of dollars to create a hospital, and I said. And they do that because they want their name on the hospital, and they want their name within the community, right? They don't necessarily say that, but that's because they want it to be called after whatever their name is. And I said, is that good? And the kids raised their hand. They said, yeah, that's great. That's a good thing. And I said, for the community. I said, that is a good thing. But I said, it flowed from a selfish heart. It flows from a heart that's really not doing this because he loves the Lord and he can do this for others, but he's doing it because he wants a legacy for himself. And I said, now put that up against a man who has no money, right? His wife's working 2 jobs. He's probably working 2 jobs. And so they're always on and off, but they have a child, and the child needs to have the diaper changed. And this man, they take Sundays off. They're in church. They love their Lord. They love what the Lord has provided for them, and they try to do their very best living in his kingdom. And he sees that child, and he says, that child needs their diaper changed. And so he goes and he changes that diaper. And I said, is that a good thing? And they're like, well, it's a needful thing. But I said, was it a good thing? And they said, well, for the child. And I said, yes, but also to God. I said, because in faith, he's serving that child. And I said, and that brings up the idea of vocation, right? That God wears us, right, in serving others, and those are good things. As the things that we do, yes, we're people, yes, we make mistakes, but God is using them in service of others, and they're good. Because
And they still need grace and mercy, because you might still be changing that diaper and go, man, I'm going to lose. I'm going to be up for the next half hour, and this kid, you have all these different sinful thoughts, and then you still need Christ covering him over, because even if we understand what makes a work and what makes a work good, it still needs Christ.
Absolutely.
And it's good for us to think about, okay, not the big stuff is good stuff. It's this little stuff that's good stuff. But even the little stuff needs Christ. And
I think that's the thing. I think sometimes we think all good works all have to be the big and flashy and the showy, and I think and how you explain it, Matthew 24, right? It's not always the showy; it's the doing the little things, but you're doing it in Christ. Why did you do that? I don't know, because they needed it. Because that's God. God gave me the ability to do it, and I did it. And that's well done, good and faithful servant. And this is the joy you have when it doesn't rest on you and your works. It rests on Christ and his work for you. So again, I agree with you 100%. Love it. Shotgun shell, he's just shooting away.
The volleys are just coming.
Yeah.
Again, next one, monastic vows. He's just going to, in a very, what is it? How many paragraphs? 2 paragraphs? 3 paragraphs?
The
it's
first
just going to blow away an entire institution of monks and monasteries, and says this is false Christ. And that gave me some pause. Like, in what way are the monasteries a false Messiah? And at first you would say, well, the monasteries did great things, like they preserved education and they were, farming and providing for their communities. But if it was a good institution but was leading people away from Christ, like, look at me, look at how I'm doing these things. Look at, Cousin Joe. Cousin Joe became a monk. Like, look at all the good things, and like you revere him and say, oh, Cousin Joe, you're doing all these good things for the community. You've without even knowing it, you walked into making him false Christ, in that you're looking to your works or your dedication for your source of your salvation rather than Christ.
I always find that amazing that he says this, and he comes out so hard against the monastic orders. And the reason I say that is because if it wasn't for the monastic orders, Luther wouldn't be the way that he was. And that's that. To me, that's that just almost a brilliance, but just maybe a little, how he's threading that needle. And he's not saying that the things that were done there were bad. He's saying the heart of why you're there is bad. Because, Staupitz was his monastery leader. He was his pastor when he was in the monastery. And Staupitz did so much for him in pointing him back to Christ and helping him along the way. To me, it's mind-boggling seeing somebody who came from that circle, right? Mm-hmm. And then is now so vehemently against the mindset of it. I think that is just, to me, it's almost whiplash in that kind of the way he presents it.
Right, and it's not a personal preference where he's like, I had a bad experience in the monastery,
right,
and therefore I'm going to take it down. No, it's all about the gospel. It's always about the comfort that comes from the gospel, and anything that takes away from that comfort of the gospel must be put away with. I'm going to fire at that. And so, like you say, it is interesting, the guy who was a monk blast the thing that he came from, because the thing that he came from was leading people away from Christ and leading them to look at individuals and say, this individual is someone that you should look up to, or by living this life, they're, again, in the Roman Catholic system, they're going to get a treasury of merits that the church can then use and to disperse as it pleases. So my question to you is, where do we see this this super Christian type stuff today? Where do I mean, we're so quick to say, well, we don't have monasteries,
No.
so this doesn't apply to us. But again, this same sin of making a false Christ can come right back in a different form. Where do we see this super Christian stuff today?
So I mean, it's easy to throw other denominations under the bus because we can see a lot of that in them. You can see a lot of that in the prayer warriors. You can see a lot of that in the Baptists and Reformed idea of pietism and I have to do these things personally and look how much better I am because I've done these things. They're super humble and things like that. But I would suppose before I go and throw them under the bus, which is easy to do, I would have to throw ourselves under the bus, right? Because I think a person that sits in the pew, the natural reaction is, but I'm better than those that don't. I'm here. And I think you see that in the Lutheran Church because, I mean, the Lutheran Church is an older church body in and of itself. And so oftentimes it's the grayer haired people that are maybe in the pews and not always the young people. And I've often heard the grayer haired people, but I'm here. It was fine for me when I was young. Why not for, and I get kind of that flavor that I'm better because I'm here. And
because I went through the experiences I did.
Yeah. And they're not here. Why aren't they here? Because they're not as good. Like, it's not good enough for you. And I think you kind of get that flavor today in that.
Yeah. I was kind of, my thought, and this is probably a dangerous thought, but I was thinking of in like your Christian education system, like you went to Christian day school or you went to Lutheran high school. Sure. And therefore you have a smugness about yourself, or you went to Luther Prep. Sure. That's another one where my kids at MLC had the same experience I had at MLC. It seemed like the prep kids thought they were a little bit better than everybody else. And of course, I'm overgeneralizing, and I'm just saying impressions that I did not share with my own children, and my children have come back and said, "Oh, this is what we've seen."
And I think worse. I think it gets worse because I'm going to throw this out here too, because since we opened up the door, let's just crawl our way right through it.
Blast our way through.
We're because of the lack of church workers that we have, like in the teaching field and things like this, the synod is actively looking into the congregations and saying, and anybody who's second career who want to come in, who's either have a degree or was a teacher in the public circle and wants to become a teacher in the private circle, and they're bringing them in to do these things. And I'm hearing over and over, not from everybody, of course, but from a lot, but you aren't an MLC grad. You didn't go to the prep. You didn't do this. So you're almost to the idea that they're a sub-par called worker or an unqualified called worker or one that doesn't understand what it's like to be a called worker. You could even expand that out a little bit. And people who are coming in through the colloquy system to be pastors.
Yeah. Right. You didn't go to some, yeah.
And I went through
the Bethany bombers or things like that.
Yeah, I went through that when I came in because I came in from the Missouri Synod. And it was, you were taught from a different perspective. You're not as sound or as good or as whatever as those who have come from our circles. And not everybody said those things, but there was the flavor of that. And so I can definitely say, not that we're full-fledged monastic, I'm in the place of Christ and I'm putting in extra works for everybody else. But it's definitely, there's the stigma of, but you didn't come from us. You came from somewhere else. And so maybe you're just a little bit not on my same wavelength. And so there's a us and there's a them.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And it, that's article number 14. Now let's get to article 15 of human traditions. And again, he's finishing things up. Go ahead.
Sweater vests were in there. I remember reading it. It says not a human tradition. This is a theological.
Okay. Um,
Sorry,
yeah, I like paragraph number 3. Like, we're in the section that he has already said, we can talk about this with reasonable people. This is that section. Like, we can talk about these things with reasonable people, and we can talk amongst ourselves. We can make some adjustments, not necessarily adjustments, but like we can talk about. This is a topic of conversation. This isn't a line in the sand. But paragraph 3, he does say something very strongly where he says, "These are the articles on which I must stand, and God willing shall stand even to my death. I do not know how to change or yield anything in them. If anyone wants to yield anything, let him do it at the peril of his conscience." So he's basically the Stephen Crowder, sitting at the university desk and saying, prove me wrong, whatever. This is like, these are things he's willing to have a conversation on, but he doesn't see any way that he can have a conversation on them. However, he does talk about, I haven't even talked about human traditions. He says, that's in paragraph 1, the declaration of the papists that human traditions serve for the forgiveness of sins or merit salvation is unchristian and condemned. As Christ says, in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. That's Matthew 15, verse 9. And the commands of people who turn away from the truth. That's Titus 1, verse 14. When they declare that it is a mortal sin if someone breaks these ordinances, that too is not right. And then again, he talks about the bag of tricks at the end, baptism of bells and altar stone and things of that nature. I still haven't seen sweater vests in here. Where did you see sweater vests?
I'm going to say the mockery. The baptizing is the mockery of the scorning of holy baptism, clothing yourself not in a full robe of Christ, but a partial.
All right. You would make a good Roman Catholic, I guess, the way that the mental gymnastics you are pursuing.
No, it is,
right.
Human traditions become a thing. We all love our traditions. We all love our, the things that we've grown up with, or the things that we think are worthwhile. I think we gravitate towards superstition often. We gravitate towards like, if I don't do these repeated things, if I don't wear the same socks, then the team's going to lose. And then if the team loses while I'm wearing those socks, well, then those socks have to be burned to repent for the loss of our whatever. And so that gets translated into the church all too easily. Even something as simple as when you put the shawl over the cross for Lent, it has to have so many folds. Because if it doesn't have that many folds, someone's going to go to hell.
Or if I could step on a live wire, whether the Christmas tree at St. John and Maribel should be lit.
Yeah, it should. Mostly because they plug it into the one that when you turn the switch on, it goes on. So if you don't want it lit, don't plug it in.
That was I think we've talked about this before, but that was when I was vacancy pastor there. That was a big issue. Like, this has to be done, otherwise it's not Christmas. And you go, wait a minute, what? And we've talked about other human traditions like confirmation, like the rite of confirmation. To what extent are we putting gospel weight on something that is a tradition? Examination, are we? To what extent are we trying to do gospel plus and say, well, you heard the gospel and you were taught the gospel, but you had to go through this ritual in order for you to actually receive the Lord's Supper, and the ritual is getting scared to death in front of people that are supposed to love you and support you. So not to say that examination is wrong, and not to say that it's wrong to stand in front of a congregation and say, this is what I believe, because we do that for new members who are coming in. We ask them to stand up in front of everybody and say, this is what I believe. We ask their confirmations. But to put it on the level of it has to be done, otherwise it's a sin, or the gospel isn't going to work. That's where we're crossing the line.
Yeah. And actually in our congregation, we don't. So ask like adult confirmands, people who come in through adult Bible information, we don't ask them to stand up in the church and do a confession. We say that they have asked and confessed what we believe before the elders, but we don't do that before the church itself. And I know that there's been some question as to why we do that with the kids still. And then usually it's the older generation that said, because we like to hear their confession. We like to hear that. And so, but I think that there is something to be said about the way we do things, and I think even the things surrounded with communion, sometimes the way that we do things is more human tradition than it is scriptural. Um, I mean, if I'm not saying that the Catholic Church is always right, but I often wonder, second graders are receiving communion in the Catholic Church. Um, you know, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, this is, I think, far too young. They're giving communion to babies. And so the question is why? And if you go back and it's like, well, what is it that we're told in Scripture? Do they understand their need? Do they understand what they're receiving? So does that have any bearing on what we do? Because it's a human tradition that we say sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. That's
Yeah.
human tradition. I mean, what if you have a fourth grader who's really kind of in tune? They understand what's going on. Would that bar them if they were ready? I don't know. I mean, you see, those are the human traditions that sometimes we throw in there just because we like clean cut cookie cutters, um, instead of having to sometimes deal with harder topics.
Yeah. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14:40, everything should be done in a decent and orderly way, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's not a legalistic way either. So, like,
Yeah.
if it's understood why we're doing what we're doing, if it's taught why we're doing what we're doing, that's orderly. If decent is always kind of a people have to understand why we're doing something. We're not just doing it just to do it, and we're because we can, that kind of thing. A Christian freedom can be abused if we're saying, well, I can do this. And then people are like, well, but why? Why are you doing this? And help me understand, and not so that I don't react in a very negative way and say, well, what's going on here? Pastor has lost his mind. We know that every time he finishes a sermon that he's lost his mind. But, now he's losing his mind because he's doing some strange thing. So anyway, there's that tension between it's good to have customs, it's good to have order, it's good to have something where everyone understands what's going on, but it can get weight that it shouldn't get. And that weight would be of saying it has to be done this way, otherwise it's wrong.
And I think
So,
on the flip
go
side,
ahead.
on that flip side is also being willing to say this tradition that we've been having, when it doesn't work anymore, is it's okay to let it go.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this conversation that Luther wants to have, is to say, let's talk about them, and I'm willing to talk about them. And if that's a tradition that's good, and there's a teaching tool in there, and we can make this work, great. But if not, we got to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important as well. Before we wrap into our takeaways, which I think is where we want to go real quick,
Yeah.
I do want to say that we did have a couple of comments that were on the Facebook, and one of the very first comments is one that I would heartily agree with, and that is Charlie Brown Christmas is the best Peanuts cartoon, and I would also agree. It is amazing when Linus is sharing just the Luke 2 gospel story in cartoon,
Yeah.
and that is great stuff.
And that's the only scene that he drops his blanket. So he's
It
got a
is.
security blanket that he
Yeah,
holds on to, and then when he does Luke 2 is when he drops the blanket. And I think that's kind of a neat symbolism there.
it is.
So
And
we can talk about Christmas movies after we close up the show in the post
I just
show.
wanted people to recognize that Charlie Brown Christmas is the best Peanuts. That's our takeaway.
So let's close off the show with our takeaways on the Smalcald articles. We're going to look at look, big picture. What's our take on the Smalcald articles? I do appreciate the bluntness of it.
Yeah.
He is, and also at the same time, not just bluntness, but you can see the reason why. It's like sometimes Luther gets mischaracterized, like he's opinionated and he has these opinions, and it really isn't a scriptural thing. It's just a personality thing. And you really see throughout the Smalcald articles the way that he designs them, the way that he talks about them. He's defending the gospel. He's defending the comfort of the gospel. So he's speaking as a pastor, like we said at the beginning. He's speaking as a pastor, and it's about souls, and it's less about procedures and traditions and likes and things of that nature, but more about souls and comfort that comes from the gospel and what he has done. And if there's anything that is stands in the way of that, he's going to blast through. So that was my, in a very blunt way. And I think sometimes in a world, we're kind of, as a society, we were, if I'm going to make an overgeneralization, we were very soft on, like we were not being very strong on opinions and things. We're trying to be like respectful of other people. And it seems like there is a societal shift, or at least I'm seeing it like in the comedy world, especially I like to watch stand-up comics where they're very much responding back and saying, no, we're going to say these words that are bad words, and we're going to talk about why we still can't say certain words, but it's more of a background and a backbone instead of saying, well, so-and-so gets offended or so-and-so gets triggered by this. And the comedy world says, but is it funny? Is it funny? And then we're going to say it, even though somebody might be triggered.
Yeah, and I would go along with that boldness. I would say his passion is the takeaway. He has a passion for souls, and he has a passion for the scripture, and he has a passion for the truth. And you see that come out. And along with that passion and that boldness, I would add one more caveat, and that caveat is maturity. And I think in the Smalcald articles, you see a mature Luther. You see a Luther who is no longer kind of flushing out his thoughts, no longer kind of throwing all of the proof passages out there and saying, I got my idea from this and I got my idea from that. You now see, not that they don't contain proof passages. I'm just saying that previously in a lot of Luther's works, you would have lists upon lists of, and I got it from this, and I got it from this, and I got it from this, and now you're seeing a Luther who's mature and says, no, I have studied the scripture so much, it's just who I am. And I think that's the maturity, right? Where and we all go through this when we're in seminary, where we're like, okay, proof passage for that, proof passage for this. I said this in a sermon. Where did I get it from? And then eventually, you're 16 years, 17 years, 20 years down the road, and you just say it. You just say it. And if someone asks you, where did you get it? You can point to it, but you just say it because you are committed to it, and you know it's true. And so you just say the truth. And he does a beautiful job, I think, in the Smalcald articles of his maturity. You see a mature Luther. So.
All right, folks. So next week we are doing our takeaways from 2025, how we grew, failed, and prevailed in the year. We've done that not every year, but I would like to do it one more time because the next section that we're going to be talking about is the formula of Concord. We were going through the Book of Concord, but now the very last document, which was put together after Luther's death. The formula of Concord is the next subject, and there's two of them. There's the epitome and the solid declaration, and so we'll be tackling that together, but that'll be in the new year. Both of us are parish pastors, and so this is a very busy time of the year, but doing how did we grew and fail and prevail in 2025, that'll be our podcast next week, and then we'll join you in January.
So before... Welcome back to the post show, and before we gather up and do a lot more in the post show, I think it's a good time, and we can do it in the post show too. One of the things that's contained in the Smalcald articles that we didn't talk about because it's really not necessarily confessional statement or meat to chew on are the people who signed it. And I think I read through all the people who signed it, and it's just amazing how many of them were doctors, how many of them were reverends. How many of them were leaders of the church, but then you run across Melanchthon, and Melanchthon's right. I agree with everything except that the Pope could still be the earthly authority if he was Christian and more gospel send
Yeah,
him.
if he gave up his divine right to be the Pope, we was just a regular bishop. And it's funny because I've been following the papacy and the Eastern Orthodox conversation because they were celebrating the anniversary of the Nicene Creed. And I'm a theological nerd, so I'm following those things and listening to the current Pope talk about, the differences between the two church bodies and the mental gymnastics that he does to say we should be more ecumenical, we should be more like open to each other. But I'm still the papist. Like, he doesn't say it in those words, but like he's saying, like, because the biggest big thing was he was saying how, or it has been said, where he said the Nicene Creed without the Filioque in there, and then so he would like, is he saying that you don't need the Filioque again? And he was in this long speech that he was giving. He says it's nice that we have everything except for the Filioque, and we still have the Filioque, and it's still like one of his, traditions of the Roman Catholic Church. But we can still, be together, except for the fact that we're not going to change. That was the sense I was getting. So I'm not necessarily being fair to him. I'm just recounting how I felt when I listened to the words, because again, it was a lot of mental gymnastics, a lot of words to listen to as he speaks. But you're saying that you want to be together, but you're still saying the reason why we're apart is still legitimate, even though 60 years ago they rescinded the excommunication of each other. There still is like, we're still different, but we should be together. Like, you should be on my team. Basically, is the sense that I got, which makes sense, because he's just saying everybody should be on.
Well, yeah, and he can't not say that he's still not the head of everybody. Yeah. Even if he wants to say that you don't have to be in our church, I'm still going to be the head of you. But that's a direct affront to the Eastern Orthodox Church if you want to go into their doctrine, because the Eastern Orthodox said you have to be Eastern Orthodox to be saved. And I mean, it's just, it's crazy. It's really a conversation in futility between the two of them at this point. I mean, one's still holding the grudge of the sacking of Constantinople. So, and that was like, what, 1275, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying in any way I'm an expert in those things, but I'm just saying I'm following these conversations, and because what the news says is completely different than what's actually going on. For example, when the papacy said that Mary is not the co-redemptrix, and you actually read the document, and he's saying she doesn't get the title, but she still has the function. So, like, right. It's like in Star Wars, where you are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master. So she's still in the saving activity. She's still really someone you can appeal to for your salvation, but she's not the co-redemptrix, which is exactly the definition of what we would say is co-redemptrix, is saying anything outside of Christ is a false Messiah.
Yeah, and that was a really good reference. I think you pulled a really good reference there.
I do like Star Wars.
I mean, that was you reached into the archives for that one. Yeah. But no, it is one of those. But they've done this. I don't know how many times with the veneration of the saints. They do that all the time. We don't really worship the saints. We venerate them, but then in their actions, they worship them. And call upon them to do and help and whatever. So I mean, it's not a surprising thing that they do that. It's not a surprising thing that he would say, well, we don't have the filioque, which is and the Son. It's not surprising that they say we don't have that, but we're going to say that, right? We don't have it, but we have it. I mean, this is just, it's the same type of thing that that Melanchthon tried to rationalize when Melanchthon, after the fact, after Luther had passed away, he tried to rewrite everything so that it would become a little bit more palatable. It's the same thing. It is no different.
Yeah, there's a distinction between Melanchthon and Luther, where Luther just says there's a clear difference between the two. We can't be reconciled, and Melanchthon isn't there yet, which is why he does what he does. Why, at the time when the Smalcald articles were written and what they were intended for, they were never used for what they were intended for. They instead used the treatise instead. So this is the post show, and did want to talk about. I needed an update. inquiring minds want to know, where is the Harley household at with the Christmas movies? How many have you watched?
So that was really good. My family started the Christmas season off after Thanksgiving dinner, because Thanksgiving dinner marks the end of Thanksgiving. Once that's over, Thanksgiving's done. And so it was marked with the heralding of the season, with the time-honored and very theologically accurate movie of Home Alone. And so paint cans were swinging, and it was wonderful, and they enjoyed it. And then we moved from that to we watched the first Santa Claus, so with Tim Allen, and that was wonderful. My kids enjoyed that, and then I conned them into watching something that was actually a little bit more edifying and uplifting of the soul and spirit. And so we had a good time singing with, because it's a musical, The Journey to Bethlehem. If you've ever seen The Journey to Bethlehem, it just came out, I think, last year, a year or 2 years ago. But it has some wonderful singing songs in there that my kids love to sing, and they listen to the soundtrack in the car during Christmas. That's like their Christmas jam. And so we had that, and that was fun. In fact, we had to watch it twice in the same night. And the second time was a little bit more laborious than, because my daughter is rolling around on the floor singing to the top of her lungs to all of the songs, and the sad part is she knows them all, and has the timing down. So good. That was wonderful. So that's where we are. I have already booked that Christmas Eve will be Die Hard. So that is going to be the theological movie of Christmas Eve. And that is because it is a Christmas movie. And then
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in there anywhere?
No. Did that come out during Christmas? Did Planes?
It was a Christmas movie.
Is it really a Christmas movie?
Yeah.
I might have to throw that into the mix, but I got to find a that.
Or maybe it's a Thanksgiving movie.
I don't know. I got to look it up.
Yeah, well, listeners can tell us.
I mean, it might be like a Tuesday movie. Doesn't warrant the big screen. I mean, we roll down the big screen for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday movie nights. So we watch one movie, except on Sunday when we watched Journey to Bethlehem twice. But anyway, we pulled on the big screen, and we have 120 inches in our living room of viewing pleasure. And so I don't know if that one would warrant the big screen.
In the Rudot household, we don't watch movies much together anymore, because our kids are at college and high school. But my oldest daughter, said, "Dad, we should," because she wanted to recreate this, that we used to. I mean, we used to watch movies together. And she's like, let's watch a rom-com together, a Christmas rom-com together, and make fun of it the entire time. So we watched a movie called Christmas a la Mode, which is about a farmer, a girl who is out east in Massachusetts, and she's running a dairy farm, and the dairy farm is going to go under, and her sister is the evil sister that wants to sell, and she's got to raise X amount of dollars before Christmas Eve. So we watched that one. And then right after, I think we started that like at 7, and we're like, well, it's 9 o'clock. We can watch another one. And so we watched another one with the same actress, but it was the Door County Christmas. Maybe you've heard of this. It's now called the Cherry Pie Christmas. So it's filmed in Door County, and it's the main character was the same main character from the Christmas a la Mode. And so that had a ton of Door County references. Bernard's Cheese is in there, and Packers is in there, and a Packer, I think Ahman Green is in there.
There you go.
And so anyway, we watched that one and mocked that one.
So do you turn off the lights? Do you turn off the lights and then put a camera that only sees your shadow, and then the screen? Just like Mystery Science Theater 3000.
No, those yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we should have our own commentary. I should bring all the podcasting equipment home and just record us mocking a show. Because we did. There was one where I can't remember whether it was the Christmas Story or the Door County Christmas movie or the Christmas a la Mode movie, where the guy keeps a secret from her because he's trying to honor what her parents told him, and then she's like all mad, like, you didn't tell me this, and the guy and my boys, to their credit, were like, well, don't you want that in a man, that he's going to be has integrity and that he's going to keep his word if he promises? And then at the end of the movie, he apologizes. I'm so sorry, I didn't tell you. And my guys are the boys are just furious. They're like, anyway. So it was a fun family event. So maybe someday in the Harley household, maybe this is what you guys will morph into. Maybe not. But
that's what we should do. I should just turn off the lights because the lights are off already when we do movie night. I should just put a camera up there, so all you see is just everybody's shadow, their heads, and then we'll turn down the volume, and we'll have the girls just make up lines, and we'll just make up funny statements for a movie, just like Mystery Science Theater, but it'd be Christmas Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
something like that. Anyway, however you enjoy your Christmas. Yeah. Enjoy your families. We are not saying one way or the other.
I am. You keep saying that we're not, but I am.
I am not saying one way or the other. Will Harley is anti-confessional and saying that these human traditions are therefore inherent. Or anyway, I don't even want to make a joke like that. Anyhow, so that's the end of the show. And the end of the post show. And we'll see you next week for our last show of 2025.